What was your "my life is over and my parents are gonna kill me" moment that you had as a child or teen? Story 1. Every single day, my mom told me to be careful near the frozen pond next to our house. One day, enough snow melted in order for my friends and I to play soccer in the field next to the pond. As you can guess, at one point the ball ended up dead center in the middle of the pond on the ice. My child brain figured if I could throw a stick on the ice, it was safe to walk on. So after making sure the ice was stable by throwing not one, but 2 sticks, I started my walk to get the ball. It was like a scene from a movie. I reached the center, and the second I picked up the ball and attempted to turn around, I fell straight through the ice and went under. I had to break the ice the entire way back to shore and had my clothes dried at a friend's house a few blocks away. By the time I got there, I thought I was on my deathbed, but I could never tell my mom I was dumb enough to go out there, or she would have probably killed me. I'm now 26 and still have never told my parents I did that. I love the thought process here. I'll take these 2 sticks, which clearly don't weigh anything close to me, and use them to test the ice. I'm honestly surprised that this kid made it that far out into the center of the lake. Usually, the ice is pretty thin near to the shoreline, so bravo to that kid for making it that far. I wonder how old you have to be before you feel comfortable sharing these stories with your parents, because clearly 26 is not there yet. Story 2. I was 17, and I drove my girlfriend home from school. We ended up in the shower together. Just as we turned off the water and she was stepping out, we heard her dad open the front door of the house. Of course, my truck is in the driveway, so he knows I'm there, but I'm nowhere else in the house, obviously. My short life flashed before my eyes. He came stomping down the hallway and banged on the bathroom door. My girlfriend, wrapped in a towel, answered the door and lied her butt off. He is down the street at one of our friends' house. I told him I'd call when I was out of the shower. Meanwhile, I'm standing frozen and shriveled in the shower behind the curtain preparing to meet the hereafter. Married that girl. Been together 26 years. Story 3. When I was 12, we were visiting my mom's family for Christmas and staying at my aunt's house like we usually did. Behind her house was a creek that ran through most of the neighborhood. This particular year, it had been really cold and there was snow at least 6 inches deep in most places. I was playing out in the snow and looked back at the creek and saw some really weird icicles that I wanted to get a closer look at. I crossed a fallen log to get to the opposite side of the creek, facing the back of my aunt's house, and walked along the bank looking at the ice. Basically, the creek was flowing and not frozen, but there was a shelf that had frozen above it, and the ice hanging from it had formed into teardrop shapes, instead of the typical spikes that I was used to seeing. As I walked, I neglected to see a patch of ice on the bank in front of me and stepped on it with my full weight. I slipped and slid fully into the creek, which was way deeper than I had anticipated. I was wearing a winter coat, jeans, and insulated boots, all of which became incredibly heavy when they got wet. I was up to my armpits trying desperately to stay afloat in freezing cold water and heavy clothes. My only thought was, my mom is going to be so pissed. Obviously, I survived that incident. I pulled myself out, stumbled up the bank to a building that I thought was a YMCA and turned out to actually be a fire station. They called my mom, she came to get me, no harm, no foul, and I was not in any trouble. Although my entire family still mocks me and asks if I'd like to go for a swim every Christmas. And for those of you who have not taken a dip in freezing cold water like that, it can literally take your breath away. It is quite shocking and wakes you up pretty quick. I'm glad this person was able to get out of the situation unharmed, because that would have gone from a funny story to a tragic one, especially on Christmas. In the comments, anyone else have a similar experience in the cold water? Story 4. When I was about 8, my sister, who was 10, and I used to play around the neighborhood with other kids, but we had to be home by 8 p.m. or when the streetlights came on, whichever came first. We had a watch on, and every evening my mom would make sure that we had one with us and it was working. So one evening we were 20 minutes late, and it was the second time that week. If we were late twice in a week, we weren't allowed to go out for the rest of the week. My sister and I were talking by the back garden gate, making up excuses why we were late and making sure that we were both on the same page in case she questioned us. We opened the gate to go inside, and my mom was standing on the other side of the gate, arms folded. That was a life flash before my eyes moment. Story 5. My mom left 14-year-old me and my 8-year-old brother alone at home to run an errand. I don't remember what he did, but he royally pissed me off. And I had a bad temper as a teenager. So I chucked a cordless phone at his face. He started bleeding everywhere, and we both panicked. I had knocked out one of his teeth, so he ran to the bathroom to see which one, bawling the whole time, and as it turns out, it was his extra tooth. He was scheduled to have it pulled a few days later. So then, the angry tears turned to grateful tears, at avoiding a trip to the dentist. We did still have to call my mom, though, so that she knew why he was suddenly missing a bonus tooth. He confirmed that he was glad I knocked it out, and she went, I have to think about this. I was grounded. Story 6. 17 years old, had a party while the parents were out of town. I had to work the next day, but timed it so that I would have plenty of time to clean before they got home that evening. Came home from work, and the sprinklers are on, and their car is in the driveway. Driving down my driveway, I was anxiety and fear personified. I walk in the house, and my mom tells me, your dad had to leave before you got here, otherwise he was afraid of what he might do to you. Story 7. Had a pretty awesome party while my parents were out of town when I was 17. They had bought brand new living room furniture less than a year before. The first new furniture that they'd ever owned or picked out by themselves. Because previously there was a hand-me-down couch and 2 recliners that my grandma bought as a housewarming gift. One of my friends barfed all over the mostly new couch. I tried to clean it the best I could when it happened, and then bought better cleaning supplies the next day, and was able to get it so it wasn't stained and didn't smell. They still own the couch and have never found out about it. I did almost get busted when they found a cigarello butt under the porch, but I just acted confused and suggested a bird maybe picked it up from somewhere. They never brought it up again. I was a super good kid, so it is possible they knew and just decided to not make a big deal about it because I was pretty straight-laced and reasonable. Oh, for sure, they figured out that this person had thrown a party. On the one hand, I'm a little skeptical that they were actually able to clean the couch so thoroughly in a pinch that there was no vomit smell at all. That is one of those odors that just lingers and lingers. I would also guess that the parents were not gullible enough to think a bird dropped a cigarella butt. Have you guys seen many bird nests being built with discarded tobacco products? Story 8. Parents were away for the weekend, and I took my dad's keys and took it for a small drive. I was never allowed to drive unsupervised, didn't have a license or anything. Was a thrill. I came back, parked, left the keys in the same drawer he left them in. Monday arrives. I come back from school, and my dad asked me to come look at the car, with a death glare. I had forgotten to pull the seat back after adjusting them for my 14-year-old legs. Story 9. I snuck out and took the car when I was 16, before I had a license to drive at night. I hit a pothole and blew a tire. I rode around on a shredded tire for 2 to 3 minutes before I drove up on a guy smoking a cigarette in his driveway, and he helped me change it. The next morning, my parents woke up early and were going to take the car somewhere, and the spare was still on. Luckily, this was right when the Goodyear or Firestone tires were all blowing out, and I told my parents that it happened earlier in the day before, and I just didn't have a chance to tell them. Story 10. When I was 10 years old, only pretending to drive a car with my friend in the back seat, I knew not to touch the ignition or the gearbox. So the car is parked on an incline. I lowered the handbrake and the car starts to roll backwards, moving steadily and with increasing momentum towards a concrete wall. Thankfully, I knew which one the brake was. So I pressed on it with all my might and told my friend to get out of the car and call my dad. All while pressing down on that brake, I thought, yep, today I either die or my dad kills me. I lived to tell the tale. Story 11. I was sitting in my back garden with my best friend, and we'd recently acquired an air rifle. So obviously, we started shooting it at things in an increasingly destructive manner because, we were 11. We shook up and banged out a can of Coke and then laughed as it went nuts, spraying its contents everywhere. Then, we got a can of deodorant, and it was even more ridiculous because it basically went bang, but in a relatively harmless way. And then we got a can of shoe polish. And it turns out shoe polish is a little bit flammable, a little bit more flammable than you might expect. The explosion set fire to my stepdad's shed, and the can itself went straight up in the air like a surface-to-air missile. Armed police arrived shortly afterwards. The talking we got from the police was extreme, but it was nothing compared to the look in my mother's eyes the whole time it was going on, because my friend and I knew that it was when the police left that things were going to get very bad indeed. The sense of apprehension is even worse than a riot cop carrying a rifle screaming in our faces about how stupid we are. It was horrifying. We were doomed. And so it came to pass. She went absolutely mental. My mother is a mild-mannered person, but not that day. Not that day. It still terrifies me to think of it almost 30 years later. Story 12. I had just gotten my first ever job at Ace Hardware, and a weekend my buddies hit me up asking if I wanted to head to the beach for next week, and I was like, yeah, of course. So I told my boss at work that a family member died, and I couldn't come in the next week. So my boss called my dad, who also works for the owner of the company in a different department, and started telling him I'm so sorry for your loss. Please let me know if I can do anything to help. And my dad was like, what do you mean? What happened? And he ended up telling my boss that I lied about the entire thing. I still got the week off and went on the vacation, but the next few days at my job were nerve-wracking to say the least. Story 13. I think I was 4 or 5, and there was a rock quarry or gravel pit about a mile from my home that my parents didn't want me going to because a bunch of unseemly youths hung out there. So, of course, this is where my flying experiment took place. I tied 4 kites to my bike and thought that if I rode fast enough and then took my bike off the steepest bank of the quarry, the kites would lift me off and I'd glide to the bottom. Probably lucky for me, but the strings of the kite wound into the bike spokes and completely locked it, throwing me so that I slid all the way down the edge of the gravel pit rather than make a measured jump. Scraped to my elbows and from my knees down, all I could think on that painful walk home, dragging my busted bike full of kites, was how my mom was going to kill me. Suffice to say, when your 5-year-old walks in, looking like the finale of Carrie, you don't immediately jump to punishment. Well, that's a pretty neat treat. Your own stupid idea saved you from your own stupid idea. Might be a little divine intervention happening. And this was probably an important moment in this kid's life too. You have that entire long walk to really let the reality of your decision set in. Every step of the way, you have a painful reminder to never do that stupid thing again. Probably aged him like 2 or 3 years. I'm glad the kid had cool parents too that just went right into first aid mode instead of punishment or shame mode. There is plenty of time for that later. Story 14. When I was in 3rd grade, I brought my brand new B-Blade to school to show to one of my friends. During the PT period, I carried it with me in my pocket because there was this stupid rumor about surprise bag checks when children aren't in the classroom. The guy behind me in the line saw it and then told the PT teacher. The B-Blade was confiscated. I tried to act cool in front of the other kids, but I was scared that my parents would find out. After going home, I pretended to search for my B-Blade everywhere so that my mom would think that it got lost. My elder brother was in the same school, and it scared me even more that someone from my class would tell him about this. Our family moved to a different place, and we moved to a different school the following year, so to this day, nobody knows. Now I'm 21, and this story makes me laugh every time I think about it. Story 15. My parents had just left for vacation, and I got pulled over doing 85 in a 45. The cop didn't write me a ticket, but gave me his phone number and told me to have my parents call him by 6 p.m. He told me if he did not get a call, he was going to issue a warrant for my arrest. Mind you, this was before cell phones were very reliable. I left a message with the receptionist at their hotel, letting them know they needed to call home as soon as they checked in, and that it was an emergency. The cop told me that there was no way that he could write a ticket that didn't result in me losing my license. And being that I was just a dumb, young kid being dumb, he didn't want to do that. He instructed them to put the fear of God in me, and he would put the matter behind him. Needless to say, it was not my finest moment as a son. Now I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that police don't get to decide not to issue a ticket, but then threaten someone with a warrant for their arrest. What exactly would the warrant be for? Because if they chose not to issue a ticket, there would be no charges. Now I could see if the ticket was issued and that person never showed up to court, sure, but now you probably have a warrant. Seems like a situation where the cop was flexing and trying to make a point, but saying stuff they probably had no right to say or enforce. Hence, why he got the parents involved. I bet this person did slow down though, so that's nice. Story 16. It was a warm spring day, we were juniors, and so a bunch of us cut school to swim and drink beer at the beach. So I ran into a girl I hardly knew, and after a couple of bottles of beer, I asked her if she wanted to go home with me, since my folks were at work and my siblings were at school. So we went to my house and we had some fun. So she's getting dressed in the bathroom, and who should walk in but my mother, who had taken a mental health day from work. Funny now, not funny at all to my pious Catholic mom. It took months for everything to calm down. When I was an adult, my father was like, "Why the heck did you have to drag mom into it? Why didn't you just check the house first?" Story 17. When I was bored and threw a tiny firecracker into the toilet. The problem is that it was one of those wall-mounted toilets, so the bottom was relatively thin. The first few hadn't exploded, the fuse had burnt out, and that's it, and the third one I missed, so it landed on the edge of the toilet. Those few seconds were enough for the second part of the fuse to start, and as it fell in, I was expecting it to create a sizable splash, so I got out of the bathroom. As soon as it exploded, I felt something wasn't right. I opened the door, and lo and behold, the bottom was totally wrecked, the wall and ceiling covered with a mixture of water and gunpowder. My mom was at work and I had about 2 or 3 hours more to fix it. So I called my grandpa, since we were and are very close, and I told him what I did and asked him if he would fix it. Of course, fixing a ceramic toilet is not that simple, so we went to a Home Depot-style shop to buy a new one. The first one we got wouldn't fit, so then we had to go back again for another one. We got there 15 minutes before closing, exchanged them, removed the broken one, mounted the new one, and I quickly cleaned the bathroom. My mom, who I live with, still has no idea that has ever happened. Grandpa told Grandma that the drain pipe was leaking, so he came to fix it, and my mom, of course, noticed the smell of the ceramic glue. But I told her I accidentally spilled hand sanitizer. We moved out of there and nobody has ever noticed, hopefully they never will. I keep away from firecrackers and my grandpa and I have a new, pretty expensive secret. Let's first give a round of applause to that awesome and super chill grandfather who basically single-handedly saved the day and made it possible to pull this off. It seemed like he didn't ask questions, didn't get mad, was just like, okay, we've got 3 hours to figure this out and replace the toilet. Let's do it. I do think it's possible, too, that the grandpa then told the mother after the fact, but maybe made her promise not to get mad about it. I mean, after all, they got a brand new toilet out of it. In the comments, anybody else have an experience where a family member kept quiet and covered up something from your parents?